What we have to do is recognize that in order to win, we can't count people in numbers alone. You have to count the combat potential of people for what China calls people's war, in which there are often no front lines, except everything is a front line. You have to build the spiritual strength of people. Now, we're not forming a church. There are, in my opinion, too many of them already. Not too many varieties of them. But that's not my business. But we have to attend to the way our works impact upon the faith needed for the struggle. We have to fight in a manner which is consistent with that for which we fight. The farmers and the eaters must unite. They have but one cause, one common interest, no essential conflict between them. What is good for the farmer is good for the eater. Without that, their eaters will cease to be eaters, which is what this problem is. There is no part of society, no constituency, which does not have the same interest. There is the people of no nation has any different interest than that of any other nation in this matter. We're speaking of the future of hundreds of billions of unborn souls, without whose success our lives mean nothing. That is the common interest which unites each and every one of us, such that there is no distinction among any of us on this issue, on this cause, on this interest. If we fight so, if we fight with love of humanity, by thinking especially of those hundreds of billions of souls waiting to be born, and thinking also of those whose martyrdom and other sacrifice gave us what was our potential and our debt to them, respecting what we pass on to the future. And if we think of our lives not as something lived from moment to moment, but as a very small piece of experience, with a beginning and not too much later an end. And think of our lives not as things which are lived for pleasure in and of themselves, but as an opportunity to fulfill a purpose which is reflected in what we bequeath to those hundreds of billions of souls waiting to be born in their condition. Such that if we at any point were to cut short our mortal life by spending it in a way which ensured the cause of those hundreds of billions of souls yet to be born, we could walk to death with joy because we had completed our life, fulfilled it. We might have been denied the chance of fulfilling it a little bit more, but nonetheless we had fulfilled it. The joy of life, the true joy of life, which relates to what the New Testament calls agape in the original Greek, caritas in the Latin, and charity in the King James Version, is referred to in 1 Corinthians 13. The quality of agape, the quality of charity, the quality of sacred life, of love, which unites us as individuals with the hundreds of billions of unborn souls for whose love we can give our lives, and who we can walk smiling with joy, knowing that in a sense they love us too, even though they're yet to be born. It gives us a sense of the true importance of our lives, the true joy of being a living human being. And we must work with one another in the sense of that attitude toward humanity, historical humanity, humanity which as a great family which owes to its past generations and the present owes to its future generations. The love uniting that family is, in the matter of works, the practical expression of faith, from which faith, the strength to fight and win this war, derives. If we can do so, I am certain we shall win. I'm better than most at understanding the laws of nature, natural law generally, and understanding such recondite concepts as absolute time and things of that sort. And I can understand perhaps more readily than most how faith expressed in this way, in a practical way, is assured of success. We are each little, we are each individual. But if we know we're united to this effect, then we know that what each of us as an individual does in this united way will be caused to prosper. Thus, in this terrible moment of humanity, when civilization as we've known it for hundreds of years threatens to be removed from us in the coming 2 to 10 years or so, we have the risk of losing civilization. And we also have the possibility of a heroic solution to this crisis, of becoming generations which in our time, faced with the cup of Gethsemane, accepted it and thus perpetuated in the imitation of Christ the cause of the salvation of future souls.
Welcome to today's show for the LaRouche Organization, the Manhattan Project, as it's sometimes called, of the LaRouche Organization. We picked that name a long time ago for the purpose of talking about the idea of a great project, secret project, a project which people didn't think could be achieved. But today, on August 5th, that has a much different meaning, and it's worth bringing it up. Because, of course, tomorrow will be the 78th anniversary of the dropping of the atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima. We will be involved together with many other organizations tomorrow, and organizations that have been doing this year after year for many, many years and decades, in not merely memorializing that date, but committing ourselves to a different idea of humanity that will allow us to say and know that that would never again occur. That is to say, the use of the thermonuclear weapon now, not merely atomic weapon, must never occur. But to do that, we will have to create a new commitment. And what that's being called is Humanity for Peace. Now, I believe we have the graphic for Humanity for Peace, which just shows the rally. And this is not merely something happening in the case of New York at the United Nations. It's happening at many other cities and in the United States, and also at least 14 of the nations around the world that we're involved with. There are all sorts of places that, as I said, regularly and have for decades made sure to take a stand against nuclear war. But we are trying to say that what's needed is something else. And we started that today with that clip, which is from the fall of 1988. Lyndon LaRouche speaking at what was called Food for Peace. It was a conference that was held at that time, and the conception was, as was stated by him, particularly in his concluding remarks, final remarks, that you had to find ways to assert the common aims of mankind and make that the basis of policy and that the basis of dialogue among people. Now, to give an idea of why this is so urgent, we want to just refer, first of all, to a statement that just came out yesterday. It was from an editorial which was published in numerous medical journals, which called on health officials worldwide to alert citizens and leaders about the major danger to public health posed by nuclear weapons. And so this came from it was sort of co-authored by the editors of, well, actually, it was a total of over 100 journals, but 11 leading medical journals, including The Lancet, the New England Journal of Medicine, the Journal of the American Medical Association, and others. And one of the elements of what they stated there, which we will reference, is even a limited nuclear war involving only 250 of the 13,000 weapons in the world could kill 120 million people outright and cause global climate disruption, leading to a nuclear famine, which could put 2 billion people to risk. You can take that off the screen now. They said, we are facing an extraordinarily dangerous moment where the possibility of nuclear war is real. And so we have a situation where, independent of the military conflict in Ukraine, this is a group of physicians that are talking about a much more general drive toward, or if you will, a slouch toward conditions under which thermonuclear war is not only being contemplated, but is a greater possibility and probability. We'll be speaking a little bit later in the program with Ray McGovern, who is an expert on these matters and will have a better sense of the immediate, if you will, strategic circumstances. Now, how, in the circumstance in which humanity is so compromised, could we propose policies that would go in the other direction? Well, first of all, it will take not any single nation, but a combination of nations working in concert for that idea. One such example of that just came to light actually again yesterday. It involves a statement that was issued actually on the 28th of July, but it was only actually released yesterday on August 4th. And was a joint statement that was issued by Vladimir Putin, president of the Russian Federation, and 7 other African heads of state. And we just referenced this here on the 28th of July, 2023 in St. Petersburg. Vladimir Putin, the leaders of the 7 countries, which are listed there, being South Africa, the Republic of Congo, Republic of Egypt, Senegal, the Republic of Uganda, the Foreign Minister of Zambia. And they called for specific steps to remove obstacles to Russian grain and fertilizer exports, thus allowing the resumption of the full implementation of the Black Sea Package Initiative of the United Nations Secretary General. Now, this refers to a grain deal that had been negotiated last year and was renewed twice afterwards, but which ran into snags because it had a provision that Russian grain and Russian fertilizer would be allowed to flow unencumbered through the Black Sea and to go to various nations in need of it. And that was not fulfilled. That was actually completely held up. The statement went on to say, and I quote, "The leaders also called upon the United Nations to take necessary action in order to release 200,000 tons of Russian fertilizer blocked in European Union seaports for immediate and free delivery to African countries. The leaders agreed to continue their dialogue on the African Peace Initiative so that a door to peace can be opened." Now, let me be very clear. The African Peace Initiative referred to the fact that this group of nations had visited Kiev and seen Zelensky, and also Moscow and seen Vladimir Putin. And they had initiated this because they wished to play a role and to represent a portion of the African continent and the African continent as a whole, because the conflict ostensibly between Ukraine and Russia is understood by them to actually be a world conflict and a kind of form of world war in piecemeal. And therefore, they had intervened so that the meeting that happened in St. Petersburg, which was actually part of a different meeting, which was a kind of Russia-Africa summit, during that meeting, these powers again reasserted their role, and they referenced this idea of releasing the fertilizer that will allow for the growing of food. 1 out of every 2 people in the world gets their food as a result of the a proliferation of the use of fertilizer globally. And so they were making this as a kind of reassertion of something called Food for Peace. Food for Peace was a policy that was first named that by John F. Kennedy back in 1961. President Dwight Eisenhower had in fact begun a policy of food relief using the then grain and other food surpluses of the United States more broadly worldwide. But it was Kennedy who coined the term Food for Peace. Back actually as he was running for president in September 1960 in South Dakota, John F. Kennedy had referenced what would become that policy by saying the problems that you face here in the state of South Dakota, dealing with the problem of agriculture, how we are going to harness our capacity, how we are going to harness our abundance and make our abundance fruitful for ourselves and for people all around the world, is a problem far more vast, far more complicated than any which faced any 19th century statesman. If we fail, the whole cause of freedom fails. If we succeed, the cause of freedom succeeds. That is the responsibility that is thrust upon a corn farmer or a wheat farmer in the state of South Dakota. He must concern himself not only with agricultural policy, but with our policy toward Pakistan and India and Latin America and Africa, and our policy in outer space, as well as in the earth of South Dakota. So President John Kennedy believed that the farmers of America, the citizens of America, more broadly speaking, had a responsibility to think in terms of the world and think in terms of America's role in the world. This conception of the presidency is one that we no longer seem to actually work with, at least not very much. Although some of our citizens, and in some instances we've been able to see some expressions of that. And I think a little bit later in the program, I believe we have one such expression, which was Kynan Thistlethwaite, who had an exchange with RFK. If we have that available now, we should play it now. But if not, we can go to our guest of today, which is Ray McGovern. And I guess what we'll do, if you don't have that ready, let me simply say that I asked Ray to come on. Ray was going to try to join the rally in New York, but for other reasons was unable to do so. And what we're here doing today is we're sort of giving people, there was, shall we say, last minute motivation to participate. Yeah, you don't have to be in New York City to do that. As I said, there are locations, Chicago, Houston, there's several places in Oregon, actually, and several places in California, LA, San Francisco, and there are many other nations. We can maybe do a whole list of that a little bit later. I understand that we actually have the Kynan RFK exchange, and I'd like to have that played now, just so that we can give people an idea of what it was that JFK was trying to instill in the minds of the farmers of South Dakota, and why we are trying to say here that this danger of thermonuclear war must be and can be addressed by the individual citizen who may think himself or herself to be powerless, but in fact is right on the cusp of history should he or she wish to be.
Hi.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Hello, Mr. Kennedy. My question is on the topic of nuclear war, which you've addressed very well in your commencement address, which I think was one of the most important speeches given by a candidate. I'm personally an organizer for an organization called the International Peace Coalition. We've been organizing peace organizations across the world to really unite against this threat of nuclear war, you know? And we really have to bridge the gap, you know, as you said, because it no longer matters what our ideologies may be, what our particular beliefs are. Humanity is on the brink of annihilation, and we need to unite on that matter, no matter what.
But we need a question, please.
I'm getting to it, thank you. But I want, because Kennedy, you talked about his American University speech, I think is probably one of the most important speeches. You know, we need a peace that's not for the grave, but a peace where all our families, everyone can cherish. And I want you to talk about that, and I really want you to endorse what we're doing with this peace coalition. And Helga Zepp LaRouche, she was the one who organized this.
We need a question, please.
She's calling for a durable security architecture among all the nations of the world. So I would like you to endorse that, and I'd like you to talk about the American University speech.
Well, first of all, I love what you said. Thank you for everything that you said.
Thank you.
And thank you for advocating for that, because it's so critical right now. I mean, we're in a potentially existential battle with Russia. I mean, the U.S. is now is effectively at war with Russia. It's a nuclear power, and they have 1,000 more nuclear weapons than we do. And nobody seems to be caring about this. So, I love what you said. My uncle, in that speech, which I agree was one of the most important speeches in American history, he had negotiated secretly a nuclear test ban treaty with Khrushchev. My uncle and Khrushchev had developed this extraordinary friendship with each other, where they could talk to each other on a hotline. Their State Department, their intelligence apparatus all wanted to go to war, but both of them had been to war. And Khrushchev had been at Stalingrad. The last thing he wanted was to go to war, and he recognized that he was a partner with my uncle. They wrote each other 26 secret letters. The first one was smuggled we had a Soviet spy who used to visit our house when I was a little boy. His name is Georgy Bolshakov, and and we loved him. The kid, me and my 10 brothers and sisters, he would play with us. He would do Cossack dancing. He would climb ropes with my dad and do push-up contests. And he's a very charming guy. And it was cool for us because we knew he was a KGB spy and a GRU spy. And this was at a time when all the James Bond films were coming out, so it was cool having a spy in our house. My uncle Khrushchev knew he couldn't trust the people, his military apparatus, and my uncle knew that he couldn't trust his. They began corresponding with each other, hiding their letters in the New York Times, which Georgy Bolshakov would fly back and forth from Moscow and give them. And they devised a plan to create the first nuclear weapons treaty of the nuclear age, which was a nuclear test ban treaty. And when my uncle and they negotiated it secretly. They kept the State Department, the CIA out of it, and when they got the treaty, the U.S. sympathy for that treaty was 80-20 against it. And the military was in rebellion against my uncle. The Senate and House, even the Democrats were all against it. And that speech was the beginning of turning the tide. And what he said something extraordinary to the American people. Because we had all been raised with this idea that we had won the war. It was America who beat Hitler. And, we were watching shows like Vic Morrow and Combat on TV that showed Americans beating the Nazis and winning the war. And my uncle said, no, it was the Russians who won the war. The Russians, 1 out of every 7 Russians was killed. Hitler leveled a third of the country. He said, imagine if every city was reduced to rubble, every forest, every field burned, every forest burned between the East Coast and Chicago. That's what happened to Russia. And he said, we need to put ourselves into their shoes. We need to put ourselves in the shoes of our adversary. And it was the first time Americans had heard that, and they started thinking differently about it. And that 2 months later, that treaty passed. And, I think it's important to think of today because nobody has talked to Putin for a year. We have no high-level relationship with Russia. We need to be talking to them. We need to do what my uncle said, which is to put ourselves in the shoes of our adversaries.
Ray McGovern served for 27 years at the Central Intelligence Agency. He was a briefer for presidents, and he walked out of that circumstance because he believed that it was necessary to found an organization called Veterans Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. We're very glad he did that. He seems to be a veteran intelligence professional who is sane, and we asked him to join us today on the verge of these actions that'll be happening worldwide. So, Ray, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dennis, for the supreme compliment. I am going to be talking about insanity here, and I do still profess to be sane. What I'd like to address here in connection with that terrible horror that happened on August 6th in Hiroshima is one aspect of U.S. motivation, and has to do with our original sin as Americans. Started with what we did to Native Americans, of course. It's called racism. Specifically, it's called white superiority. Now, yesterday, the head of the National Security Council of Ukraine, which we support hook, line, and sinker, had this to say just yesterday. Russians are Asians. Therefore, they lack humanity. Here's exactly the quote. Russians are Asians. They have a completely different culture, a completely different vision. Our key difference from them is humanity, said Danilov, the head of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council. Huh? I would like to not fast forward, but fast backward about 45 years. Jose, if you're ready for that clip from General Westmoreland, who led our troops in Vietnam, the troops fighting against people they call gooks, who didn't look like us. And again, there was a tinge of racism throughout that war. No one said it quite eloquently as General Westmoreland did a couple of years after the war. Do you have that, Jose?
Many bombs, many coffins. These are for children. 800 or 900 a week. I have lost 7 children myself. Many have died here. Though it's nothing like in the countryside, many more have died there. In the countryside, there are no coffins. There's no money to buy them.
How did all the children die?
Poison. Poison, you know. These planes keep spouting and spraying the stuff, and so many people have died. It seems to destroy their intestines. With this spraying and bombing, so many have died. Each day, right on time, the bomb craters appear. Hundreds of tons are dropped each day. And we can't talk about it. we can't talk about it because we are afraid of the government.
It can be described much like a singer doing an aria, that's totally into what he's doing, totally feeling it. He knows the aria, and he's experiencing the aria, and he knows his limits, and he knows whether he's doing it and doing it well. Flying an aircraft can be a great deal like that.
What's a race driver feel like? When does a guy want to drive an Indianapolis 500 and go charging around there? I guess perhaps the risk of dying, being killed is part of it that makes it thrilling.
I can tell when the aircraft feels just right. I can tell when it's about to stall. I can tell when I can't pull another fraction of a pound, or the airplane will stall, flip out, and spin on me. I would follow a little pathway on something like a TV screen in front of me that would direct me right, left, or center. Follow the steering, keep the steering symbol centered. I'd see a little attack light when we stepped into attack. I could pull the commit switch on my stick, and the computer took over. Computer figured out the ballistics, the airspeed, the slant range, and dropped the bombs when we got to the appropriate point, in whichever kind of attack we'd selected, whether it be flying straight and level or tossing our bombs out. So it was very much of a technical expertise thing. I was a good pilot. I had a lot of pride in my ability to fly.
Well, the Oriental doesn't put the same high price on life as does the Westerner. Life is plentiful, life is cheap in the Orient. And as the philosophy of the Orient expresses it, life is not important.
Or, am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can I be heard? Okay. Well, there you have Westmoreland. Westmoreland was from the great state of Georgia. So was Jimmy Burns, the Secretary of State, who was the single advisor to President Truman, himself a bigot. He would never refer to African Americans other than by using the N-word. He was the sole advisor that said, yeah, let's drop these atomic bombs on the Japanese. Now, MacArthur, Eisenhower, Leahy, all the 4 stars and the 5 stars said, don't do it. They had a conscience, okay? They were less motivated by other factors like racism, like white superiority, actually white supremacy. So what I'm saying here is that you have a bent in our leadership that sees white supremacy as embodied in NATO. I mean, look at NATO. What's the distinguishing characteristic of NATO? You got it. All white. Now, in the midst of the Vietnam fracas, there was a very poignant moment when Angela Davis, who had been protesting loudly and clearly, most people know that Angela Davis was African American. She was rounded up by the FBI. They got their girl, right? And they put her on the front page on the cover of Newsweek, okay? Shackled in chains. Now, at that particular time, James Baldwin, who was in France, wrote Angela Davis a very poignant letter. And I'm sorry to say that it still applies today. I'll read portions of it to you. The date was November 1970, so half century ago. Dear Sister Angela, I might have hoped by this hour that the very sight of chains on black flesh would be so intolerable a sight that the American people would spontaneously rise up and strike off the manacles. But now, more than ever, Americans appear to measure their safety in the chains and corpses of others. And so Newsweek has you on its cover, chained. Let me put it this way, says James Baldwin. As long as white Americans take refuge in their whiteness, they will allow millions of other people to be slaughtered. So long as their whiteness puts so sinister a distance between their own experience and the experience of others, they will never feel themselves sufficiently worthwhile to be responsible, to become responsible for themselves. Now, we do feel responsible sufficiently to change our fate and the fate of our children. We know that a person is not a thing and is not to be placed at the mercy of things. We know that air and water belong to all mankind and not merely the wealthy. Okay, 1970, guys, 53 years ago, air and water belong to all mankind and should be preserved. We know that a baby does not come into the world merely to be the instrument of someone else's profit. And finally, my dear Sister Angela, some of us, white and black, know how great a price has already been paid to bring a new consciousness. If we know that, then we must fight for your life as though it were our own, which it is. We must render impassable with our own bodies the corridor to the gas chamber. For if they come for you in the morning, Sister Angela, they will be coming for us that night. Therefore, peace, Brother James. What I'm saying here is that from our earliest history as a country, we have seen this white superiority work its way into our consciousness. Is it still there? Of course it's still there. Listen to our approval for the kinds of things that the National Security Advisor in Ukraine says about Russians being Asians and therefore not really up to it, not really the same humanity, mind you, as we. Our President Biden betrayed his own version of this superiority. 8 days ago, he was in Maine. And after all the rhetoric and after all the speeches, he met at a private home. And this is a rendition of what he said. He said, you know, Madeleine Albright had it right. We are the indispensable country. We are the exceptional country. He used the word essential. We are the essential nation, okay? And then he said this, what could possibly bring the world together? The President of the United States. Who could do it unless the President of the United States does it? What nation could do it? Now, the commentator, who's a very prominent American historian, a historian of America, like 19th century of America, but a very firmly rooted Democrat, she comments here, his vision reached back to the 1940s, to the post-war institutions that helped us rebuild Europe and create lasting alliances. Yeah, right. But his vision is out of date by at least 20 years, okay? Finally, what does he say? The whole world is changing, says Biden. But if we grab hold, there is nothing beyond our capacity. And the professor recording this comments, if I were writing a history of the Biden administration 150 years from now, I would call out this informal talk as the articulation of a vision of American leadership, period, end quote. So that's the vision. The vision is gone, folks. Without vision, the people perish. With this kind of vision, the people also perish. So what I'd like to say here is that when Hiroshima was allowed by President Truman and Secretary of State Jimmy Burns from the state of South Carolina, where was, did I say where General Westmoreland? Yeah, General Westmoreland from the state of South. Where is that fellow, what's his name? Lindsey Graham. He's from South Carolina. You know, there's something about, well, I know some of my best friends are from South Carolina, okay? But I like to end up with saying, look, whether it's the Yellow Peril, now very much at work with respect to China, whether it's the so-called gooks in South Vietnam, whether it's the camel jockeys, the towel heads, which our troops were taught to apply to the people in Iraq or Afghanistan, whatever it is, it's racism, pure and simple. It's white superiority. And I would just have to say that with respect to nuclear weapons, if this is the mindset on the part of the president, and he's already acquiesced in his military advisors telling him, oh, Mr. President, the Ukrainians are our best friend. They get the right ideas about, Asians and so forth, but they're out of ammunition. Instead of saying, you're fired, for God's sake, he says, oh, that's too bad. Let's give them some bars. And they said, well, sorry, Mr. President, we're kind of low. We're low on the ammunition anyway. Oh, my God. Well, we do have these cluster bombs here. Yeah, let's use the bombs. Yeah, but we know the Russians have more of them than when you're asking when we run out of cluster. Well, then on the top shelf up here, we have under lock and key. Those are the tactical nukes. So we could use them. After all, we are superior. We have to work our will in this world. And if we grab hold, we certainly can. My God. Suffice it to say that with 6 decades of watching Russian leaders and U.S. leaders do this pas de deux, okay, I have never been so afraid that there will be a nuclear exchange which will not stop in Europe, but will do us all in. Meanwhile, let's say we avoid that. I say that we should pay attention to people like Rudyard Kipling, as well as James Baldwin and Angela Davis. Let me recite for you a short ditty from Rudyard Kipling, who talks about hustling the Asian brown. It is not wise for the Christian white to hustle the Asian brown, for the Christian riles and the Asian smiles, and he weareth the Christian down. At the end of the fight lies a tombstone white with the name of the late deceased, and the epitaph drear, a fool lies here who tried to hustle the East. My friends, we have to step up to our original sin of racism, of white superiority, and more specifically, supremacy. We have to get it through the heads of the white people who reign us and those who have been co-opted to join us from other races. And that the end is near unless we mend our ways and repent, repent of our sin of racism, and allow the free interchange of ideas. And that way, and only that way, can our leaders be brought to see that they have no other option than to, what you do first in first aid, for God's sake, you stop the bleeding. People being killed as we say these things. Stop the bleeding in Ukraine. have a ceasefire, go to negotiations, and work out a reasonable settlement where no one feels threatened in Central Europe, not the West and not the East. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ray. Before we go to a couple of things we're going to ask you to respond to, could you say something about a matter that is regularly brought up every year when Hiroshima and Nagasaki come up, which is the so-called necessity for dropping the bomb? Why was the bomb dropped? Do you think it was necessary? And why do you think that people are still claiming one or the other?
Well, we were all taught in school, of course, that the reason the atomic bombs were dropped was so that we could save thousands of GIs from having to invade Japan. That was a lie. That was propaganda. We had broken the Japanese code. We knew exactly what they would settle for. All we had to do was promise them, okay, you keep your damn emperor if you need to. We won't kill him. We won't string him up. Keep him. He won't have any power, but you can keep him. Had we said that, the war would have been over. Okay? Now, Truman had this wonderful weapon. Japanese didn't look like us. How are you going to test this weapon and show the world how powerful the United States is? Okay? Well, you drop it, for God's sake. Do you drop it on an island like MacArthur and those, some sort of desolate island? No. You drop it on people. You kill a lot of people, okay? And that's precisely what Truman and Jimmy Burns authorized. And they had the same attitude as Westmoreland. Now, there was another element, of course. The Russians were coming in at the end of the war, and we were already preparing to sort of contend with the Russians instead of saying, hey, can we work things out? Can we talk? Can we? There's enough in this world so we work things. Instead of that, no, we're going to show them how powerful we were, and we're going to get in there and do this kind of stuff before the Russians came in. So that was an ancillary factor. My position, and I think it's proven by people like Gar Alperovich, who wrote the book on this. It's that it was really Truman and Jimmy Burns saying, well, now, these people are the equivalent of camel jockeys and towel heads in Iraq later. They're gooks and they're Japanese, and we hate them, and we could do this kind of thing to them. So the parallel with what the head of the National Security Council of Ukraine said yesterday about Asians and how they lack humanity, it was just so striking to me. And it's not foreign at all to the ears of people in the White House who are, look at them. Well, I won't comment further.
We have something that, Ray, people have not seen, and this involves a discussion that happened between the president of the East African nation of Eritrea and Vladimir Putin. This was only actually a few days ago, relatively, I guess probably about on the 28th or 29th of July. We're going to show this portion of it. It was a longer discussion, but it's the president of Eritrea speaking to Vladimir Putin about the president's evaluation of what he thinks about the present, if you will, global strategic situation, the war, so-called Ukraine-Russia war, and what he thinks is required. Let's play that, and I want to get Ray's reaction to this.
When people talk about Russia, Ukraine, I say there is no Russia-Ukraine war at all. There is no Russia-Ukraine conflict. This is war declared by NATO on Russia. The war declared by NATO on Russia is not only for Russia, it's for dominating the whole world. It's for hegemony. This is an agenda developed after the end of the Cold War. They came up with this fantasy about containing Russia, containing any power, small, big, that challenge them technologically, economically, socially, culturally. They have to contain everybody. This defunct ideology, it's a defunct ideology. I say Russia did not do its preparation to face this declared war. Even though Russia was aware about the dynamics of what was going on. NATO is defunct. NATO does not exist. NATO is under intensive care. EU does not exist. EU is under intensive care. Now, 30 years ago, when they decided to contain Russia, they felt that was a major threat for them. China was not considered a threat at that time. Now they know. They missed the point. They couldn't contain Russia. They will never contain Russia. Ukraine is a sacrifice. Ukraine is a price they have to pay. They will not pay it on their own. They will provide billions and billions, even trillions, to continue this war. And now we need to have the narrative straight. This is not war between Russia and Ukraine. This is declared war against Russia because Russia was the major threat at the time. Now they can't dominate the whole world. They have to defeat Russia so that they hegemonize everything. No one should be their equal technologically. Militarily, they have to be superior. Economically, they have to control everything, grab every resource here and there, technology under their control. That dream is no more. Now the fighting going in Ukraine, it's their battleground. That battleground is a sacrifice for them. And we need to put this straight on the record. When a big meeting like this, Russia, Africa is held, people will have to come to a consensus. This is not war between Russia and Ukraine, to me. And anyone who has a different explanation will have to tell me. This is war declared on Russia, but declared war for hegemony. The last 30 years, we have seen the details of the mechanics of this declared war. This last event is the final phase to me. It will end sometime. NATO will not get out of intensive care. EU will not get out of intensive care. These are systems that are crumbling. It's only a matter of time. And the whole world will have to be prepared not to defend Russia, but stand with Russia so that this hegemonistic idea will not prevail at any point in time in history. How do we design a plan? How do we fail this one without any further cost? They are printing money. They are not manufacturing anything at all. It's printing money. And this has been one of their weapons globally. The monetary system, the global monetary system, controlled by dollar and euro, has been used. Sanctions here, sanctions there, sanctions there, grabbing this account, grabbing that account, has been one of their tools. This is not going to continue indefinitely. And we need a new financial architecture globally, not controlled by euro, not controlled by the dollar, not controlled by other currencies.
So, Ray, just wanted to get your comments on what you've just heard.
Well, it's very interesting, isn't it? Ethiopia used to be one of our closest allies, and now he's speaking the truth, the head of Ethiopia there. It comes out of the mouths of top U.S. policymakers themselves. After all, it was Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin who blurted out about a year ago, these are exact words, "We are moving heaven and earth to weaken Russia. We are moving heaven and earth to weaken Russia, and that's what Ukraine is all about." Okay? Now, what does the president say? President Biden has said, we are out to cause Russia a strategic defeat. Okay. Now, the problem is, well, actually, I would comment here that to show the degree of unreality in the president's hegemonistic mind, he has said just 2 weeks ago, Russia has already lost this war. So there's a degree of Well, President Putin called it craziness. Okay, he said it's crazy on the part of these people. For example, to take on China, the yellow peril, as well as taking on us Asians, Russia, and all the others. It's crazy. And what he added was, I attribute it exactly to arrogance and a feeling of impunity. Period. End quote. Now, I happen to agree with Mr. Putin on that point, but it doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what Mr. Putin thinks. If he thinks that these people still operate out of a feeling of impunity and superiority, okay, they're going to be in for real rough sledding, okay? And if they're crazy, well, the implications of that are incredible. What are Russian military leaders saying to Mr. Putin now? There's a lot of evidence that these guys are crazy, that they think they can grab hold of everything and make it the way they want. So we better be on high alert. Who knows? They may even resort to tactical weapons. We have tactical nuclear weapons. We have to be ready for that. That scares me to death.
Second thing, I think it's probably the final thing we'll have you respond to, Ray. We have a clip, and this is also for people if you've just joined us. We're on the eve of a set of actions, sort of, you say, mass interventions being made internationally for the cause of peace on the 78th anniversary of the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. There was one of our colleagues, Jose Vega, was on the Jimmy Dore show talking about this. Let's play that clip, and then, Ray, just get your response to that.
Hey, so there's a big deal happening August 8th. There's going to be a rally for peace, Humanity for Peace, Peace Rally. There it is, August 6th, 1 to 4 p.m. at the UN. And you can help support, because it takes money to put these things on. So you can go to their, but let me bring on the man who's organizing this, Jose Vega, an activist based in the Bronx. He's a member of the Schiller Institute and worked as staffer for Diane Sayre, who ran as an independent. He has recently confronted New York-based politicians about their support for Ukraine war and to demand accountability from the Biden administration for blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline. Please welcome Jose Vega. Hey, Jose.
Howdy, Jimmy. Thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure to be on your show.
So tell me, where can people go to help support this?
Was it the videos we watched?
Yeah.
It was him. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kurt, I don't think I've ever been on the show when you were on. I've always wanted to talk to you and say hi. But first things first, that is a Give Butter link. It's givebutter.com/humanity for peace. I think that's what it is. I don't have the URL off the top of my head. What it is this is happening at Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza here in New York City. That's happening at August 6th, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. This is actually an international peace coalition. We've had about over 30 or 40 organizations around the world completely endorse this rally. And not only that, but we know that there's going to be international press there as well. We know for a fact Russian media is going to be there. We know that Chinese media is going to be there. We know that other countries' media is going to be there. Brazil, I think, has been confirmed. Some other Central American countries. We have Scott Ritter, who will be a speaker, as well as Garland Nixon. And we also have some surprise speakers who I can't say because of security reasons. It's kind of like a really big deal that we're getting all these endorsements. We are going to have statements sent in from people like Max Blumenthal, Anya Parampil, and others sending in. Ray McGovern was supposed to be there live, but he couldn't make it. And my cat is trying to get my attention right now. I hope you can't hear that in the back. But there are other other statements as well coming in. Ray McGovern couldn't be there, but he is sending in an audio statement as well. And overall, what this rally is a encapsulation or a process in which we are taking the last year and a half full of interventions. people have seen my interventions. People have seen other people's interventions. People like them. They go viral. What this rally is a chance for people to get in on that action. Because now what we're doing is we're culminating other people's efforts, other people's ideas, motivations. In all these other organizations, it's been kind of loose and fluid, and people have been doing this and that, and it's all been leading up to this moment. And this is the moment that is going to completely crystallize everything, all of the efforts together into one cohesive movement. Everything that's been happening around the world, this is being shaped by it, whether it's the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa coming together to overthrow the US dollar, or whether it's people in other countries who have been standing up against the persecution against Julian Assange, or it's been the people who've been standing up against NATO in the European countries. It's all coming together at this rally. And that's why we need your help to get over the hump and actually motivate this rally. So please be there and donate if you can. As you can see, we're about $7,000 short to make this work.
So say again the URL for the donation. What is it?
It is Give
I have it pinned.
Butter, I believe.
I have the givebutter.com.
Givebutter.com?
Givebutter.com/humanity for peace. That's right. This is oh wow, thank you, Free Assange. Just put in a $250 donation. Thank you so much. This can completely build the rally. We also have 3 presidential candidates, 2 of which, one is a Republican presidential candidate, Aaron Day. One is a Libertarian presidential candidate running under the Libertarian Party, Mike Mertat. And we have a presidential candidate who's running for president in Haiti, of all places, going to be speaking at this rally on top of Scott Ritter and Garland Nixon and others. I mean, this rally has, I keep saying it, the ability to laser focus everybody's efforts into one big ray of positivity and real change focused on that day. That day will be a fulcrum point if we make it work.
I think you will. I think we can do this. We could help get them. We'll help get the message out here. I wish I could attend. I can't, but I will be sending in a recorded message for the people, and if that's okay. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Please.
Okay.
You and Steph too.
Thank
everybody.
you.
Get Kurt in there. Get Mishka to send in a funny skit. That'd be great.
Oh, okay. Maybe we will do that. Okay. So that is August 6th. That's this Sunday. So that's this Sunday.
That's right. It's on the anniversary of the Hiroshima bombings.
Whoa.
Okay, so Ray, obviously you were mentioned there a few times, but of course we are doing what we're doing today as a way of getting people ready for tomorrow, and we'll give a couple of announcements after your response. So, anything to say about what you just saw or about this whole effort?
Sure. Can I be heard?
Yes. Yeah,
okay. Well, I'm very proud that my native Bronx is producing people like Jose Vega with the sense of justice and truth that some of his predecessors lacked, like Colin Powell. I just want to say something about Jose and the other Schiller people who are doing these interventions. Now, most people know what an intervention is. If you had alcoholic in your family, you surely know, okay? Well, I just want to point out that Jose and his compatriots have been doing these interventions long before President Vladimir Putin called people in Washington sumasshedshi. It literally means walking out of your mind, insane, out of their mind. So what we're trying to do is address an intervention here, trying to intervene and not prevent alcoholism, but reduce insanity. And the way they have confronted all manner of people It brings me back to when I had a unique chance to confront Donald Rumsfeld down in Atlanta back in May of 2006. You can look it up. It was very unusual because they didn't know I was there. But I guess I would just say that this is the kind of thing that is the action that we need. We can talk forever. Some of you know that, and I'll finish with this, that I favor a dictum called the Noah principle. And it's pretty simple. Listen or you'll miss it. No more awards for predicting rain. Awards only for building arcs. Now, I see the August 6th demo in front of the UN as a big, big plank to build this arc. Let's get to it with our hammers and nails. Let's consult all people in other justice-seeking organizations. Get this thing off the road, because only we, if we get off our rear ends and stop rhetoricizing about all this, stop speaking, build those planks. This is a big one. Thanks very much for letting me say these things.
And thank you, Ray, for being with us today. This has been very important for us today to have you with us. And as always, we more than appreciate your words, your deeds, and in specific what you just said about building arcs. You return us to the actual original idea of a demonstration, which was an experiment with truth. Demonstration not just supposed to be some sort of a march or a protest. Those words often get used interchangeably. But when Gandhi used it, he talked about the notion of an experiment with truth. And a small number of people can do that experiment, or a large number of people can do that experiment. In either case, it is as valid in terms of what it does to speak truth, if you will, to power. And so we want to thank you for being with us today. And what we're going to do is we're going to just close again, let everybody know, Humanity for Peace, that's tomorrow. It's August 6th. At the United Nations, that begins at 1 p.m. It'll be at Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza. And you can also get on this. There's a link, and it'll be live streamed as well. So you can also join us via the live stream. If you're in another city, check us out. Check out the site, because the site will give you updated views of where else there are going to be rallies. They're also all over the place. And then there are also other activities that other people are doing. Let me be very clear, which, as I've said, have been going on for decades. A good friend of mine, Peter Kuznick, had done these kind of activities, including in Hiroshima, taking young people to Hiroshima, has been doing this for decades. And so we are really, in one sense, joining something that's already there as a sentiment, but we're now trying to, as Jose said, focus it in a way that the proposals for a new security and development architecture, these proposals become what we actually act upon. That's what we've got to do, as was addressed by President Afwerki of Eritrea a bit before that. I think the best way to give you a kind of final word on this is that we're going to close with a clip just from a couple of days ago. This is an interview that was being done with Laurie Spencer, and it features Anastasia Battle, who is going to be moderating tomorrow the entire rally, and independent candidate for U.S. Senate, Diane Sayer.
I saw an interesting poll just yesterday saying that a third of Americans say that we should send our troops to fight in Ukraine. Stunning. 1/3. And I'm thinking, well, I guess that 1/3 should be the first to go then. Let's go sign up at the local recruitment office. I don't really see them rushing down to the recruitment office to sign up. So, are they willing to put their muscle where their mouth is and their bodies on the line? Because I'm telling you, folks, I really don't have high hopes of winning a war against Russia. If American kids go over there, they're going to die in large numbers. It could make Vietnam look like a walk in the park.
Absolutely. No, and the irony is that this war isn't even about Ukraine. It's not. Nobody actually cares about the people of Ukraine. If they did, they would have allowed the peace negotiations that have already been worked out to be accepted. But we keep sending money, we keep sending weapons. And so what this is a whole process to get not just war with Russia, but with war with China and with any nation that you see cooperating with them, especially around the BRICS, right? You're seeing nations in the world who are rising up against imperialism, who are saying enough, right? Like these African countries, Eritrea, right, was just in Russia and said, you know, this is enough. We've had enough of this, right? These countries want to come out and actually fight for their sovereignty and their right for progress. And that's really what, you know, this war is about. It's not about Ukraine.
No, it's about money and control of Russia's resources, I think. That's my take. And, you know, it's an old war. It's 100-year war. I'm a historian. I read a lot of musty old history books. The United States and the West has been trying to destroy and do a regime change in Russia since at least 1917. We did this all during the Cold War, which was completely dumb. And now we're doing it again in a new Cold War. And they're not even a communist country anymore. But they've got a lot of resources, and we want those resources. We want to control that vast landscape, just as a guy named Adolf Hitler did once upon a time. That was the whole reason that Hitler wanted to invade Russia and to conquer it, was the resources, the Lebensraum, you know?
Well, also what a lot of people don't know in the United States is that there's a whole new financial infrastructure that's been created with the BRICS, like the new development bank, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, and that this is allowing developing nations to sit down at the table as equals. Not saying, oh, Mr. Banker, would you please give me some money and then screw me over in a year when you blow up my currency, which is what's happened. That's what's happened to all these countries. They know it. So you have a new financial infrastructure which is in place, which respects nations. So that's a huge threat to the establishment right now, quite frankly, a bankrupt establishment.
You better believe it. And, you know, today, because I'm very excited about this rally, and I'm so glad that you guys are doing it. I hope it's a huge success. I sent out some invites to people that I know are speaking at this rally tomorrow, because you've got an all-star lineup. Thought we might get a couple of celebrities to drop by tonight and do a cameo. And one of them just showed up. Let's bring her in, Rick, if you could add our friend Diane Sayre. She is an independent candidate for the United States Senate, the great state of New York. She challenged my lips aren't working, Chucky Schumer for his Senate seat. And she's not going to stop fighting for the people. Welcome, Diane. It's great to see you. Great to see you face to face. Hello, my friend.
Exactly. Thanks a lot. Can you hear me okay? I just want to make sure I have the right audio connected. Okay, great.
Yep, sound good.
Thanks. Great. Wonderful to be here and to see you. And I think you're right. I think there's a lot of excitement building around the rally. I visited a large mosque today in just outside of New York City, where someone I've known for many years is on the board of trustees, and he made the announcement of the rally. There were probably about 600 people there. Everybody took leaflets. He himself is coming to the UN. When I was running for Senate against Schumer, he would always introduce me as saying she stood by us after 9/11, because as people may know, after 9/11, and LaRouche, actually, Lyndon LaRouche put out an incredible press statement called "Shoot the Neighbor's Cat" on September 15th, where he said what the news media is trying to do to people is like the guy who comes home, discovers his house has been robbed, takes out a shotgun, runs next door and blows away the neighbor's cat. And when his wife says, honey, that's the neighbor's cat, he said, I don't care. And if you don't get out of my way, I'm going to shoot you too. And what LaRouche was warning against was a stampeding into war against little nations which could not possibly have had the capability to carry out what happened on September 11th. And he warned, if you do this, you are going into an era of perpetual war. Whereas you had that incredible gesture of goodwill, actually, from Putin, who was the first head of state to call George Bush after it happened.
That is right.
Right, we're taking down our, whatever the systems are of missiles that are ready. We don't want to trigger something even worse. I mean, a real gesture of goodwill. And here we now are trying to destroy and overthrow Russia. So my friend from this mosque, every time he introduces me, he said, and in New York, what happened, I should just finish that part, is that particularly Pakistani Americans, but Muslims in general, were getting picked up and incarcerated. They were taken off to prison and detention centers, even in the middle of the night. Their families didn't know where they were, and all kinds of Muslim-owned businesses went under. It was a huge witch hunt.
They were targeted.
Exactly.
They were targeted.
And he always says, introducing me, she stood with us after 9/11. And so, of course, then people hearing it from him, who's very respected in the community, are very, very open. And I think what you have going on now in Africa, because the continent is, as Anastasia was just developing, is, in a sense, it's the embodiment of the transformation of the new system. That if we can prevent humanity from completely annihilating itself, this continent, in collaboration with China and Russia, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, could be a paradise. Every nation there could be phenomenally developed. They're clearly going to have high-speed rail before the United States at this rate. And they want to punish them, and they want to stop that. So you have a block of West African countries, and now including even Algeria, warning, because in Niger, you know, there was just a coup against the government, and the U.S., you have to put the president back in, you have to put him back in. And the African nations are saying, no, we don't. No, you don't run us anymore. And I spoke with a young man from Guinea. He thinks that World War III could actually start in Africa. And because the tension is now massive. This is the front of the transformation. So I think people having this sense that it's really either a new era or a dark age and mass death. There is no in between. There's no middle ground. As Lincoln said, a house divided cannot stand. The United States at a certain point could not continue to exist half slavery and half free. That issue had to be resolved. The world no longer can stand with some nations developed and some being colonial rulers. It's over. It's the end. There's no coexistence between two diametrically opposed systems anymore.
What we have to do is recognize that in order to win, we can't count people in numbers alone. You have to count the combat potential of people for what China calls people's war, in which there are often no front lines, except everything is a front line. You have to build the spiritual strength of people. Now, we're not forming a church. There are, in my opinion, too many of them already. Not too many varieties of them. But that's not my business. But we have to attend to the way our works impact upon the faith needed for the struggle. We have to fight in a manner which is consistent with that for which we fight. The farmers and the eaters must unite. They have but one cause, one common interest, no essential conflict between them. What is good for the farmer is good for the eater. Without that, their eaters will cease to be eaters, which is what this problem is. There is no part of society, no constituency, which does not have the same interest. There is the people of no nation has any different interest than that of any other nation in this matter. We're speaking of the future of hundreds of billions of unborn souls, without whose success our lives mean nothing. That is the common interest which unites each and every one of us, such that there is no distinction among any of us on this issue, on this cause, on this interest. If we fight so, if we fight with love of humanity, by thinking especially of those hundreds of billions of souls waiting to be born, and thinking also of those whose martyrdom and other sacrifice gave us what was our potential and our debt to them, respecting what we pass on to the future. And if we think of our lives not as something lived from moment to moment, but as a very small piece of experience, with a beginning and not too much later an end. And think of our lives not as things which are lived for pleasure in and of themselves, but as an opportunity to fulfill a purpose which is reflected in what we bequeath to those hundreds of billions of souls waiting to be born in their condition. Such that if we at any point were to cut short our mortal life by spending it in a way which ensured the cause of those hundreds of billions of souls yet to be born, we could walk to death with joy because we had completed our life, fulfilled it. We might have been denied a chance of fulfilling it a little bit more, but nonetheless, we had fulfilled it. The joy of life, the true joy of life, which relates to what the New Testament calls agape in the original Greek, caritas in the Latin, and charity in the King James Version, is referred to in 1 Corinthians 13. The quality of agape, the quality of charity, the quality of sacred life, of love, which unites us as individuals with the hundreds of billions of unborn souls for whose love we can give our lives, and who we can walk smiling with joy, knowing that in the sense they love us too, even though they're yet to be born. It gives us a sense of the true importance of our lives, the true joy of being a living human being. And we must work with one another in the sense of that attitude toward humanity, historical humanity, humanity which, as a great family, which owes to its past generations and the present owes to its future generations. The love uniting that family is, in the matter of works, the practical expression of faith, from which faith, the strength to fight and win this war, derives. If we can do so, I am certain we shall win. I'm better than most at understanding the laws of nature, natural law generally, and understanding such recondite concepts as absolute time and things of that sort. And I can understand perhaps more readily than most how faith expressed in this way, in a practical way, is assured of success. We are each little, we are each individual. But if we know we're united to this effect, then we know that what each of us as an individual does, in this united way, will be caused to prosper. Thus, in this terrible moment of humanity, when civilization as we've known it for hundreds of years threatens to be removed from us in the coming 2 to 10 years or so, we have the risk of losing civilization. But we also have the possibility of a heroic solution to this crisis, of becoming generations which in our time, faced with the cup of Gethsemane, accepted it and thus perpetuated in the imitation of Christ.